everyone. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Office Hours, where we learn what they don't teach you about personal experiences in the classroom out here on the streets. I'm pumped for today's episode because I have with me Jared, who is the co-founder and creative director of Tobe. It's Tobe Media, not Toby.
It's Tobe, yeah. Tobe like Kobe.
Toby
Yeah.
like Kobe. Tobe Media. You have a lot of really cool things going on, like all over, up, down, inside out, that I want to unpack, like just happening behind you. But the first thing that I want to talk about, honestly, is like your 5 to 9, or what you do outside of the work when you're creative directing the team at Tobe Agency.
Cool.
What do you do in your 5 to 9?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am a dad of 2 now, recently number 2. So life has been sort of changed quite a bit. So that's obviously one giant chore. I'm a husband, and also a sort of like wannabe street photographer, I guess you would say. Really into aerial photography. That's sort of like my thing. Into like street filmmaking anytime I can like break out the camera. That includes like home videos for the kids. Yeah, that's sort of like the hobby that I've kind of kicked around for the last 5 or 6 years now, was picking up a camera and sort of just pointing it anywhere. And that obviously came into a lot more up front just because of the kids. You know, you always want to have the camera sort of ready. So that's kind of like the passion I've been running with for the last couple of years. But yeah, outside of that, it's not really that impressive. It's kind of boring. It's just being a dad, which is, you know, a million things, as I'm sure everybody out there who's a parent understands.
Yeah, a dad in and of itself has like 13,000 different titles and job and responsibilities as well too. What I love about that though is that you figured out how to have like express your creative energy now through your kids and find new sources of inspiration. But like, where did that creative energy come from? Like, where did you start to realize like you were gonna go down this route of being a creative?
Yeah, so I guess if we want to go way back, it was like arts and crafts in like grade school. I was always into like the arts and crafts stuff. Anytime I got a chance to make a presentation, whether that was for like science fair or, you know, whatever type of presentation that you present in like middle school or high school, I felt that it was always cooler to make the presentation look cool rather than whatever the content actually was of the presentation. At that time, I really could care less what was actually, you know, kind of written out into the content, but really cared about the presentation of it. That was sort of the thing. And then out of high school, I was kind of like lost at a direction that I wanted to go. For some reason, I thought it was going to be in the medical field at one point. I played sports, so it kind of was it was like a natural, like, hey, maybe I can get into sports medicine. But then quickly found out as I got out of high school that wasn't the thing for me. But in the, like towards the end of high school and then kind of rolling right out of high school, I started to DJ, of all things. I just picked up DJing. And at this point in time, like it wasn't sort of like the cool thing it is now. It was just more like either DJ'd on the radio or you were DJing at the nightclub that, you know, people would come see you on the weekends. So I picked that up and I really loved music. I'm not a musician by any means, but I really gravitated towards just like spinning music and playing music for people. So with that came, you need to, what they call now, market yourself, which I didn't know that was a term back then. It was just like, hey, I want people to come hear me play at the club. How am I going to promote myself? So I picked up Photoshop and learned how to make flyers and business cards. And at the time, that's when you could, like, burning CDs was like a pretty big thing. So we'd like burn a mix CD and then you'd print the label. So I had like a printer and a burner and all these things set up so that I could like sort of have my own like little record label, if you will, but only mix CDs. I wasn't making music, but that's sort of where I picked up sort of the art like bug. And from then it was like, wow, I really enjoy like graphic design. Is there more? And as I started going through college, you know, just taking your normal classes, I would always take like a graphic design class or a computer, like computer art class in some fashion at the time, because it wasn't as laid out as it is now, where there's like specific tracks that you can sort of follow. And that just sort of kept evolving. And every time a semester would come up, I'd pick up a new computer like animation class or, you know, computer art class or, you know, another graphic design class. And it just kept snowballing. And eventually I was like, okay, like I'm all in on this. I need to figure out sort of like a career path in this. And I fell in love with visual effects and computer animation. So I ended up going to school, to a trade school for that, and kind of just going full on into that. And got out of school from there, landed a job at a studio doing visual effects here in LA. And that sort of like rolled me into my career of, you know, kind of creative direction and just being in the creative media space. And alongside of that, the funny thing is I DJ'd alongside all of that time. I finally did give it up when my first was born, just because of, I had to give something up. I didn't really have a lot of time left, and kind of had to say goodbye to the first love. But that being a DJ sort of propelled me into like computer arts, which is where, you know, we got to today almost.
This is phenomenal. And for all the parents out there who are listening, you can breathe a sigh of relief that you can be really successful and still start out as a DJ, hanging out with your friends.
So true.
what what I also think you'll have to do at some point in time, maybe for your kids or your kids, is explain what burning a CD is. Like, I know I'm going to have to
Absolutely.
explain this to my kids one day. We're just going to have to sit down, go through the archives.
Yep.
But no, what I love about the journey that you've been on with your self-discovery of creativity is it sounds like you have always thought about the experience, like end to end. Like music is an experience. As musician myself, like music is an experience. How you promote yourself and drive people to come to the club, to come hang out with you, like that's an experience. And then how that's evolved into some of the design, the graphic design, that's an experience. How do you use that, you know, those experiences to create to create experiences, make that more personal, make it more evocative for the audiences that you want to spend time with?
Yeah. So I guess just going back to, we'll go back into the DJ realm for a second. So at that point, like burning CDs and, you know, handing out these like mixtapes, like I would talk to my friends or people that would come to, you know, a gig or whatever, and sort of find out what they like. And I would almost personalize the next version of my mix CD that I would hand out at a gig to what they were liking. You know, obviously I'm, as a DJ, you're kind of like a tastemaker by design. It's kind of like part of the deal. But I thought like crowd input was always really important to that. It's not as, I guess it's a little bit more two-way road than your traditional musicianship might be, where you're like, I'm making a song, I'm going to put it out. If people love it, they love it. If not, you know, maybe it's not for them, right? Where being a
Right.
DJ, you're kind of like reading the crowd in real time, and, you know, things are happening sort of in a two-way flow at all times. So that's kind of one way that I always thought about it. Another way is like going back again, creating like printed flyers, which is like a crazy thing to think about, but creating these printed flyers
They're
again.
coming back. I'm guaranteed. I promise you, they're coming back.
It's funny. Print media is actually, yeah, I think it is. You're right. It's coming back because it's obviously a lot more, it's a lot more accessible to print things, and, you know, and things you can do with printers in general, and, you know, are way better now. But also like just handing somebody like a one-off postcard is really, or like a handwritten note is really important. So yeah, you're right. Just to sidebar that, but yeah, again, creating an experience like on that flyer, it was like designed specifically for the people that I knew were going to either want to come to this or were already sort of coming to this. And then, sorry if I didn't answer the question directly, but you know, we can jump into sort of how that's fast forwarded, you know, to now's content creation and media if you want. But that's sort of like how I always thought about it. It's always like, how am I putting out something that is also giving value to the person that's going to enjoy it on the other end, you know? And I always wanted to think about like, how would they receive it? Not just put stuff out to put it out.
You know, I love that you use the term two-way flow, and that should be like the next name of your like future podcast or whatever you want to come up with, because the two-way flow is something that I think marketers, they don't think about these days. Like automation and scale have just made it a one-way flow. Like we are just like pumping it out and out and out. And the way that you have thought about even your craft way back when and into now, it's got to be a two-way flow. You have to know what that feedback loop looks like, and ultimately care about what the recipient of your information, of your content, of your creation is going to think about, care about. How are they going to react? What is this experience end to end? So I love that concept of a two-way flow. And now that you're running an agency, co-founding an agency, working on the creative direction of this agency, how do you use two-way flow to keep yourself honest, right? To think about the experiences that you're helping to create for the companies that you partner with.
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, we could just and I'll give a little background story just about Toby in general. So Tobe Agency, we're primarily focused right now on what we call rich media or media 2.0 or content marketing 2.0, which is more focused on podcasts and videos and things at like a little bit higher of a creative level outside of just like blog content and just your normal written content from normal email marketing that you would get. And a lot of companies, we're not obviously we're not inventing anything new here. We're not reinventing anything. This is out there. So a lot of companies are sort of on this trend, but with that media, we can prescribe or build a two-way flow because as we're doing right now, I can connect with an audience a lot better and a lot deeper because I'm showing my emotion. You can hear my emotion. Also, like clients that we interact with, every time we interact with them, it gives us something new to think about. Like, oh, we need to think about that and propose that in, maybe the next round of our content cycle or their content cycle. So that's sort of like how we think about content in general. But then just going into like the two-way flow of when we're building like a podcast series or a video series, we're really diving into, obviously we want to look at things like their persona, like who's their audience persona that they're going after. What are they, looking at, what's trending, all the normal marketing type deals. But we're also looking at it like, okay, we have this 30-minute session or, hour-long session that we're going to record. How can we provide the most value out of it so that the audience who listens to it actually gets something out of it? They're not just listening to me talk about my product for 30 minutes or an hour. They're actually getting something and learning something from what we're talking about, and they're gaining new knowledge. Now, if it's good enough, that's up to them to then now come back to us and say, hey, we really like what you're doing, or to our client, we really like what you're doing with this series, and we like the way you think. How can we align with what you're thinking? So that's sort of like what we do at the ground level when we're starting to concept a series. And then as we build the series and we build like a larger piece of media, like a podcast, then it becomes really easy to sort of start breaking that down and using it within the rest of the content cycle. And I know we're probably going to jump into a little bit of how to break up content into pieces, but that's sort of like how we think about it from like a 30,000 foot level.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that, like, even before you think about how you break out that content and repurpose that content and try to get the max scale out of that content, it goes back to that two-way flow. Like, you have to have legs for your content to stand on so that it can be repurposed. And so you can get more mileage out of your thought leadership. One of the things that really struck me as you were talking about this too is like triangulating all the things you need to triangulate, including the two-way flow between you and your clients, obviously. And then the two-way flow between your clients and their clients.
Yep.
And then the two-way flow between both of you, your clients and your agency, as well as the market trends. And there's a variable of like entertainment that has to go into that. And that is really like trifecta of what makes the two-way. Now we're on a three-way flow.
Hit me on the two-way.
To hit me on the two-way, right? Like,
Dating
I'm so
myself.
here for this. I'm so here for it. Mixtapes, hit me on the two-way. Like, we're dating ourselves. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Anyway, there's so many things to balance and be able to wait to create that two-way or three-way flow. Like, what do you use as your sense of stability when you are trying to find that flow and trying to find what is going to capture audience's attention and still help orient folks to like what the purpose and value of one of the companies you support is?
So I think number one is you have to be listening at all times, right? That's just a big thing in just marketing in general, or just media in general. You have to be listening to what's sort of out there. Pay attention to the comments in, the relative markets that you're in. So if we're dealing with a client that's in X market, we should be really paying attention to what the other competitors or other people who are adjacent to that space what are they talking about? What are their customers talking about in the comments section? And this is really crazy, but one of the things that we actually do in our competitive analysis beginning a podcast series is like, we'll go and read the competitors like comments in Apple Podcasts to see what the people are talking about, not what the podcasters are talking about, but to see what the people are talking about.
Got it.
So that's number one. That's sort of like where we can, kind of make sure that we're always in the loop, if you will. Obviously, it's hard to read everything, and that sounds really scary. You can't, read 17 social media platforms worth of comments. You'll never make anything. So the second thing is really important. Get started. Don't sit there and wait to have the perfect plan. Obviously, strategy is really important. Timeliness is really important, but like at some point you just need to actually get started. One of the best things about a video series or a podcast, and a podcast in particular, because it's a common thing to have this seasonal flow, it can always change and morph, and it should always change and morph. In fact, the way people look at websites now, where your website shouldn't just be like a poster that stands up for 10 years. It should always be, it's a living thing. It should be changing at all times. That's the same way we feel about podcast media, video content. So we're not really in the business of like, hey, let's create just a solid about us video that's going to live on our website for 10 years. We'll do it. No problem. We can handle it, but that's not sort of where our heart is. We're definitely in more of the wheelhouse of like, hey, how can we make content that's great? Obviously we want it to be evergreen, but it's good now, but then how can we keep on improving on it? And you have to actually start to figure out what you need to improve on, again, to get feedback from now your audience that you're starting to build, or the audience you may already have, to see what they're resonating with. And that's sort of like where we kind of ground ourselves.
Yeah, I think what's also interesting too about the way you approach your work is that you're really focused so much on the audience in a way that it seems like you want to prioritize creating experiences that are not one to many. Like you want to get as one to few or one to one wherever possible. But content in and of itself, which is an amorphous term, we should probably spend some time defining what we mean when we say content, right? But content in and of itself is designed to be one to many. In the way that I've also watched how you repurpose that content, you figure out how to make that really large asset become one to many, to one to few, and then one to one. So let's set off and let's define content, and then let's also define this like crazy robust content repurposing strategy you and your agency have. So content, like how are you defining content? What even is content today? There's just like so many, we just kind of use that term for everything and anything at this point in time.
Oh man. So this is like the $1 million question, right? What is content? So at this point, I believe content is sort of anything from a tweet to a full podcast to a blog post, right? And that's the amorphous term that you were mentioning. But really, we always think about content with context. So again, we're not just trying to spew out a fire hose. I mean, there's enough fire hoses out there that are just like kicking stuff out. And is it going to happen, just by the nature of some of the platforms? Sure, right? We're going to put something up and it's just going to be in somebody's feed like a fire hose. But we always try to at least be purposeful and think of the context. So when we're breaking down a larger piece of content and we're figuring out where it needs to go, we may not put the same piece of content in Instagram that we would put in LinkedIn, right? Because the audiences are different, even though the person that's reading it may be the same person. When they're in the platform, they are a different person or a different persona, right? They're going to Instagram for a different reason, or they're going to LinkedIn for a different reason, or Twitter or TikTok or Facebook or whatever it is, right? And that's a whole other topic that we could dive into, right? The psychology of that. So that's sort of like how we think about the context of the content, even though, again, maybe we're creating a 30-minute podcast for a mass audience, which may only be 500 people. How do we get it down to the 10 people, 5 people, 1 person that's going to read it? It's putting it in the right place at the right time with the right context. So again, like if we say something in this that's really like numbers related or metrics related, I would expect that to go into LinkedIn right away, right? But the beginning when we're talking about like, hey, I was a DJ, maybe that's great for Instagram, right?
Yep.
So that's sort of like how we think about like content and breaking it up. And again, like blog posts are great, written content is needed, SEO is a thing, like you still have to do all of that, but we still like to think about at the 30,000 foot level, like who's going to be listening to this or reading it or watching it. so that we can have context for that content. I don't know if I actually answered your question, but I just went into like a crazy rant.
I think you did, but you did it kind of in disguise. Like the way that we were thinking about two-way flow just a moment ago, like really, really crystallized for me as you were describing that, because the two-way flow happens when you stop thinking about the persona and you start thinking about the person and what that person is doing and the context surrounding that person so that you can then capitalize on that two-way flow. How'd I do?
No, that's it. Yeah. So like
that.
yeah, again, going back to the Instagram feed, I always use this as an example because it's the easiest one. When somebody who's even yourself as a business person, you're going to Instagram, you don't want to listen to more metrics and more marketing speak. You don't want to listen to that, right? You're like, I want to look at pretty pictures and funny things and people's dogs and this awesome surf video or, whatever it is, right? Or somebody playing a guitar. It's more your personality that kind of comes out in that platform. So
you just described my Instagram feed to a T, by the way. Dogs.
we probably have the same feed. That's why. So when we're thinking about, okay, we need to put a piece of content in there, like, well, what are we going to put in there? I don't want to put this marketing heavy metric thing that is just going to get blown by, right? We need to put it in there. And again, because it's your feed and you're head of marketing at your department. So yes, of course the metrical side is really important to you, but when you're looking at Instagram, it's not. So why would I put that in front of you?
Interesting. So that context for the person to establish that two-way flow, help me understand where the content repurposing helps to put a finer point on the person and the context you need to achieve to create that two-way flow.
Yeah. So again, I guess I'll start at the beginning of like how we think about breaking down a larger piece of content and what we call micro content. So we think of, so we're a HubSpot agency. So some of the terminology for any HubSpot users or members out there may sound really familiar. So we start with a larger piece of media, rich media, which is a video podcast or a video series. And maybe that's, anywhere from 12 minutes to an hour long, episode, whether it's an interview or a story or whatnot. We take that's what we call our pillar piece of content. We strip the audio out, that becomes a podcast. If it's a podcast, we put the video on YouTube or wherever the video platform needs to be, wherever the video platform for the client is going to be. Then we start to break it down into micro snippets. So then we cut 8-minute segments, 12-minute segments, 5-minute segments, all the way down to 1 minute to sometimes 30-second segments based on where the platforms we are going to be putting these pieces of content out for our clients and the context of actually what's happening in the conversation or the media piece. So an 8-minute segment on breaking down sort of what we're talking here, there might be a great 8-minute chunk that we can put that'll go right into LinkedIn because it's perfect. It's 8 minutes. People in LinkedIn will spend 8 minutes to watch it. I'll put it on YouTube also because 8 minutes is a great time for YouTube. People will take 8 minutes out to watch a video. The 45-minute segment, I'm probably not going to put that on LinkedIn because nobody's going to watch that for 45 minutes, right? And most of the stuff we may be talking about doesn't even pertain to the audience that it needs to go in front of. So again, maybe the 45-minute piece is only for the podcast and that only lives on the audio feed where people have time to digest, come back, rewind, fast forward, play it faster, whatever the case may be, to listen to a podcast because that's what you do. You when you go into a podcast, you're expecting to be there for 20 to 40 minutes, right? So then the 1 minute and 30-second segments that's where we get kind of really creative. Those start to go in places like other channels like email. We're saying something very specific to our audience or our clients saying something very specific to their audience that's going to really help their sales cycle. So we'll put that in an email. And now the sales team has media to actually capture attention without just using plain text. And we'll building some of the structure when we're in production or pre-production of the series is very important. So we'll think about these things ahead of time. Where do we want this media to live? This is all strategized out. We're not just sort of hitting record and going. We are strategizing it. So the conversation may have a specific 5 or 6 minute section that we know, okay, this is gold for our sales team. We're going to talk about this for 5 or 6 minutes. Then we're going to break it down and put it into an entire sales sequence for email use only. And that may never show anywhere else on the internet except for within email. Then there may be a section for the website and it goes on and on, right? And the idea is like we've taken this 30-minute piece of content and we've now created 20 to 25 micro pieces of content giving you an entire like war chest of content to put through sales, marketing, social, website, whatever you want to call it. We have enough there. And it's a phrase that I stole this from Brad Bird, who's the director of The Incredibles, Iron Giant, one of my favorite directors. Use every piece of the buffalo. He says that in one of the BTSs in a Pixar film.
Yeah.
Got to use every piece of the buffalo. We have this huge thing. We can't waste any of it, because production and pre-production, it takes a lot of time. And for anybody who out there who's done a podcast or a video series, like all those steps are really rigorous, and it does take a lot of time to produce. So you got to make sure you get every piece of juice out of your orange that you can.
Yeah, I like that. And the other thing that I'm also hearing you say too is like consistency. Like we at this point in time, we like the buyer is very much in control of their journey. You never really know where they're going to choose to actually have an in-person interaction with you. And you never really know where in their buying process or buying cycle you are going to intercept them. And so content repurposing and making sure you're using the entire buffalo, that also helps with consistency in messaging, so that someone won't get confused that, wait, is this the company that was also talking about this over here? Like these ideas, like I don't see the connectivity. So this micro content and the way that you've really mastered repurposing does also help with the consistency of the brand as well too. So there's not just how do we get more out of this, it's also how do we help our audiences orient themselves to us to establish that two-way flow.
Yeah. And any successful podcast, and I always go back to podcasts because to me, it's the piece of content, and we can go into sort of like how we think about podcasts for business rather than like a personal podcast. But to me, it's the piece of content that every business should be and can be creating that they can repurpose. And the thing that always scares people is like, oh, well, I'm not going to have anybody listen to my podcast. Well, are you trying to be Joe Rogan, or are you trying to make a sale? Like what's the purpose of your podcast? And that's a whole strategy on its own. But that piece of content is exactly what you're talking about. Being consistent with that at all times. Like in order for a podcast or a series like that to be successful, you have to be consistent. You got to show up every time at the same same bat channel, same bat, that time. And people can expect, we're creatures of habit, and we like what we like. And if we're expecting something from a brand or a company or messaging in a certain way or something to show up at a certain time, we want to see it. And if it doesn't show up, it's kind of on to the next one. Right. So that also helps build like brand affinity as well.
Yeah. I mean, to that point about brand affinity and like really harnessing the power of this strategy, like what brands do you admire right now who are really understanding how to take content, make this like one-to-many medium feel one-to-few and one-to-one?
Well, you guys are doing a great job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We try.
And brand affinity, I totally feel like I stole that too. Wistia is a huge influence on the way we think. I love that their approach to a video technology platform is not the approach you should take to a video technology platform. They're great at creating brand affinity. They're really quirky about it. They're really funny about it. They have all these sort of different ways to display the product and hide it, and I think they do a really great job. I would say another one is probably, let's see, just going bigger brand. I would say REI is one of the bigger brands out there that does really well at creating a one-to-one connection with their audience outside of just, hey, buy my cool jacket, or buy this cool piece of gear that you can go hiking in. I think they do a really good job of their podcasts in general are just really cool, and they help you sort of connect to the brand outside of just buying something in their retail store. So that's a cool one. Trying to think of some other ones that are like top of mind right now. Let me think about this for a second, and I'll see if I can get another one. But yeah, those are the two that really just like always strike me as they do a really good job.
Yeah, it's funny too, like the way that Wistia and the personality of the brand come through, it really resonates more. It's funny that you'd also talk about REI, but like what I admire about Wistia's approach, and also envy in the problem that REI gets to solve, is they get to solve the B2C brand.
Right.
I think Wistia does a really good job folding in the personality of a B2C brand to help like have their product be hidden in plain sight, essentially through all the way that they think about content. And then consumer brands like REI, for me personally, it's like a Burton gets, every
Mhm.
time I get a Burton email, I'm like so pumped about it because I just get to leave my 9 to 5 and like jump
Yep.
right into my 5 to 9. But like
Red Bull's another one
B2B,
that's been doing it forever as well too, right?
absolutely.
Their whole thing is like, we're just going to keep doing all these crazy extreme events and these different things. Oh, and by the way, if you like our drink, you can buy that too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so they all have really thought about how do we immerse people in the experience
Exactly.
through our content and express that experience through our content. And that's what takes it from that one to many into the one to one or one to few. Um, all right. So if someone wants to get started in developing these types of experiences and really, I mean, you mentioned strategy a couple of times, like where do they get start? What's the starting point to develop that strategy?
Yeah, so I think if I mean, I guess if you're a business or you're a creator or you're just a one-off, like a solopreneur,
Hmm.
it really comes down to why. Like,
Hmm.
why are you creating this content? What's the
Hmm.
purpose? Are you creating it because you think you want to look cool and just feed, your social feeds, or are you creating this because you really want to connect with your audience to sell what, your experience? So I
Yeah.
think why is a really big, and this comes, I guess this goes deeper into more of the branding essence of, the
Hmm.
company, and really attaching in some aspects. At some point they're fused together and they're not indifferent, and they should be, that DNA should run through. But I
Hmm.
think why is always a big question that you need to ask. And who,
Yeah.
why and who. If you ask and these are, I guess, normal marketing things that you would think about, but why and who, why are you creating, who are you creating for, and then what are you creating, right? What comes
Mm.
after? So if my audience, if I feel like I've blocked out, like my audience is going to be great because they watch a lot of YouTube, well, maybe I'm going to
Mhm.
move more towards like a short video series. Or if I think that they're great because they don't have time to listen to or watch content, maybe we're going to move more into the podcast. Or maybe email is the best way. So we're only going to do short videos that are based solely in email messaging. So that's sort of like how we would think about it. And then we get to the like, okay, cool. Now, how do we make this? Now we start to think about like, how can we put a creative spin on it? What's the, sort of like, what's our hook? What's our shtick? How are we going to make this personal to them? How can we also express ourselves creatively? And then from there, it kind of like, it starts to blossom.
I'm obsessed with this. I think the starting with why, like if you haven't read the book Simon Sinek wrote about starting with why, like start there and then you can figure out your why and then the who. Um, if people need help though with this whole process, I would love to drive them to you and your agency. Like how can they reach out to you? How can they get in touch with your agency to get some help with starting with that why and then building the intention and thoughtfulness all the way through their content and content
Yeah.
repurposing?
So we can talk about this all day. We love to talk about it. So please feel free. You can reach out to us. You can just go to our website, which is tobeagency.co,
Mhm.
TOBE agency.co. And
Like
you can check
Kobe.
out, you can check out our cool, we have a pretty cool website. It's very Wistia influenced, I guess you would say, between some of the colors and just like the thought. But we like to think of ourselves not like a normal agency. We wanted to like, be a little bit more colorful than just your normal content marketing agency. But yeah, feel free to reach out to us there. Myself, our other content strategists, we love to talk about this. This is like our favorite thing. It's our sort of like soapbox that we stand on, just regarding in this idea of like content 2.0, where we're moving away from basic written content and now everybody needs video and audio content in some fashion. And I think it's even more relevant now with apps like Clubhouse coming out. Like it's even more of a reason like, hey, people are listening, and there's no other place better than to have somebody's ear for 20 minutes in like a podcast. Like you don't get that attention in an email or a Facebook post or whatever else you think. That's like the best place to grab somebody's attention.
Absolutely. Well, keep stepping on that soapbox because we're out here like rallying behind you with this, that two-way flow and establishing, the person, not the persona through your content is what makes that content really impactful. And it helps you just get more mileage out of this.
Absolutely.
Jared, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Office Hours. It has been an incredible time. Quick question though.
Sure.
I see a lot of Back to the Future, memorabilia behind you. Like, there's a story there. What? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so huge Back to the Future nerd, probably dating myself again, but it's funny because Back to the Future 2 is actually my favorite, even though I know Back to the Future 1 is the better movie, technically, from a movie creation standpoint.
Yes.
But I watched Back to the Future 2 when I was probably like 8 or 9, something like that. And self-lacing shoes and hoverboards became like my MO. So
yeah.
my two loves in life outside of the family are technology and digital art. Like those are my two. And obviously, I mean, I love traditional art, but I'm not very great at it. I'm really good at digital art. But that's sort of like married the, like Back to the Future sort of marries those two worlds. And that's kind of probably where a lot of it started. But yeah, so I actually have a lot more that's not shown here because I'm a little bit embarrassed. I don't want to be that guy. But yeah, that's sort of my love for Back to the Future.
I love it. And we come full circle too. Now we know your root. We know your creative root. And it was all because of Back to the Future 2 when you were 8. I love it. Thank you so much again, Jared. Great to catch up with you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.